Welcome in. It is episode number 2 of Scrushy on Business. My name is Dave Green. Richard Scrushy is alongside. Richard, what do you think about week number 1 of Scrushy on Business?
Well, I thought everything went really great, David. I was really pleased. I had a lot of good comments. People, email me, and people that I know, and even my family members were very kind to me. So I appreciated that. When my wife tells me things look good, then I know it really looks good, because she's probably my biggest critic. So it went well, and you did a super job, and I appreciated your help.
We had a great time and really just introduced the concept of Scrushy on Business and reminded people of your background and how you got started. A fascinating story of your beginnings from Selma, Alabama. And, I really just enjoyed hearing about, the way you viewed working from an early age, that it wasn't just something you felt like you had to do, you wanted to do it, you wanted the money, and you also really liked the experience of working and earning that money. It meant something to you.
Oh, absolutely. I think that early on in our lives, when we have our first job, and we work, and then we get that paycheck, and we realize that you can go out and help people make whatever they're doing, and whatever, like in that situation where I was in a restaurant, I was able to make that restaurant a better restaurant, and then I got paid for doing that, and I took great pride in that, and I was really proud of the job, and I think that that's a good start. What's really interesting, Dave, and you know this, but back in that day, we didn't have the limits that we have. You have to be 15 years old now, but then I was 12, and I was able to go to work. This morning I was I saw on the news, one of the news channels, they had a young man on there that had started a new company. And he was 14 when he started the company, and he's 19 now, and he has multiple locations. So, we're not limited. I guess you have to be 15 to get a job. Man, that's what the law requires. But at 14, this young man started a new company. He had an idea, which is a great idea. It's multiple locations now, and he talked about getting his first $100,000 in the bank from starting a company at 14 years old. I mean, he talked about the fact that entrepreneurship was a spirit. He felt like it was a spirit that we have, and I believe that. I think that's something. It's a gift that we have. Some people are driven to do things, and other people are not. And I'm not really sure that the way we're currently set up, that we're encouraging young people to do things today that maybe back in that day we were more encouraged. Now we see today a lot of things happening on the internet, and a lot of digital things, and now we have AI. So we're seeing, that starting up so many companies now. Young people are trying to be the next Elon Musk, or the next Jeff Bezos, or I mean, everybody's looking now at other ways they can start businesses, really with very little money, because you can start a business on the internet and end up a tremendous success, and have almost no investment in it. So things are changing, but there's still a lot of the old ways where you just work hard, you got a great product, you fill a need, people buy it, they need it, and it provides a service or whatever. So I mean, the way that I've started was working hard and providing a service, and then making something happen that found a need and filled that need, and I think that's still an opportunity.
And we're going to spend a lot of time in this episode really talking about that, is how Richard decided to start HealthSouth, and how he grew that company, but also how it relates to someone starting a business today, and some of the things that you have to go through, but really the thinking and the process before you get to any of that. So that's what's coming up on today's episode of Scrushy on Business. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. The show is available, of course, each week here on YouTube if you're watching. It's also available on Apple, Spotify, and all major podcast outlets. And if you want to reach the show, you can visit scrushyonbusiness.com. Follow us on social media at Scrushy on Business, and you can also email the show at info@scrushyonbusiness.com. That's info@scrushyonbusiness.com. You told us the cousin story, and I want to go back to that before we kind of get into the meat of this week's episode, because I think it's so important that everyone realizes that even someone who is as brilliant of a business mind as you are, who started your career working very early, got into management and really dealing with big things at a very young age, you still needed that push. You still needed someone to tell you what it was like to own a business and paint that picture. And it was a cousin and a friend of yours who really set you into going off on your own.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Let me say this. I saw the need. Okay. I saw the need. And it's interesting the way our minds are put together. It's like, when we sit down to put a puzzle together, right? We see this piece goes here and maybe that piece will fit there and we try to figure it all out. Well, our minds, the entrepreneurial spirit, the entrepreneurial mind sees things and says, oh, there's an opportunity there to do something special. There's a need there that needs to be filled. I wonder how much it would cost to fill that need. I wonder what the return would be if we built a business to fill that need. And I have people will tell me all the time, they'll say to me, I've got an idea. I had a guy sent me after this podcast, sent me an idea, told me about his business and asked me to help him. He sent me his idea and I said, you got to tell me more. And the guy was tickled to death that I even requested, but his business was very interesting. Now, I'm just not sure how big the need is, but there is a need. So I want to evaluate that with him. So I'm actually got a communication going on with the guy from an email that I got after the last show. But yes, you have to be encouraged. I think sometimes it takes that. I had not stepped out on my own and I was drawing a paycheck and I was getting paid. So I had, so for me to say, okay, I'm going to eliminate this paycheck. I'm going to take what earnings I have made and I'm going to go all in and invest it in a new concept and a new company. I knew there was a need. I had discovered that need. I had researched that need. I knew that need was there and I saw that opportunity and I could even in my own mind, like I said, it's like a puzzle. I could see the different pieces and I began to calculate, okay, how much is it going to cost? How many people am I going to have to hire? What are the returns going to be? What is the reimbursement? Because that was in the healthcare business. So I had to look at what are insurance companies going to pay? What will Medicare pay? Will Medicare even pay it? And then I had the whole concept of, in order for me to get a patient, I got to get a doctor to write a prescription and send the patient to me in order for me to treat them. And then it was like, what are all the services and how are all the different services reimbursed? So I was putting all of those pieces together in my mind. And like I said, it was a puzzle and I had that together. So when my cousin came and talked to me and told me about how he had built his business, which was a much simpler business, it was a cleaning business. He was cleaning, headquarters of companies and office buildings, but he had taken a risk. And so, I began to look at that entrepreneurial situation where we step out on our own and we take the risk of a business. And he had taken a risk and his reward was that another company came in and said, hey, I like what you're doing. You built a successful cleaning business. We want to buy it because we're in the cleaning business and you've got all of these buildings down here in downtown Anchorage. We want to roll them up into our network and we'll pay you a very nice return. So boy, that took me to a whole nother level. I said, really? So here you started this business. You'd only been in it like 4 or 5 years. You built it up and now you're going to make this big return. So I'm like, okay, well, there's the monetary side of it. He took the risk. He went out and did. So I'm saying, well, you know what? I think I'm as smart as my cousin. I think I can do this. My situation was far more complex. And I was going to have, additional funds down the road because I was, bricks and mortar had to be added in and equipment and medical equipment and a lot of talented people that were licensed and whatnot. So I had a lot bigger project on my hands, but he did encourage me. And that encouragement is exactly what it took. So, when I think about our show here today, David, I think you and I have a challenge to encourage young people that are out there right now, just like the guy that emailed me and said, here's my idea. Here's what I want to do. What do you think? I'm going to study that situation for that guy. And I mean, he's willing to talk to me about it. And if it makes sense, and I think there is a return, I'll encourage him. But I'll also tell him, if I look at it and I say, look, you're not going to make any money doing that. I don't believe you will. I'll tell him that as well. But the glass is always half full with me. I'm trying to find what's good about things, what makes things successful. I'm always on the positive side. You'll never see me go in and find something wrong. I just want to find out if there's enough right. And that's a different way to approach it.
Info@richardscrushy.com info at scrushionbusiness.com. Info at scrushionbusiness.com. You will get that opportunity yourself. If you have a question for Richard, you can ask him by sending a question to that email. You can also, again, follow us on social media at Scrushy on Business and reach out that way as well. And, there was one other thing that you had brought up that I really wanted to hit on because I think it was so important. And that is the opportunity that you had, that I also had in my career, which was to learn on someone else's dime. I was put into a situation where I was managing a radio station. I was hired to manage the programming side, but I quickly realized that nobody else was managing the other parts either. So I had to take on a bigger role, but they allowed me to, and I did it. And at a young age, I was able to, frankly, make some mistakes while they were paying me and learn. You had that opportunity as well. And other people may not realize, but they have it too. It's called listening and learning while you're working and preparing for the future. Isn't that right?
That's right. And, what you've got, Dave, what you just explained to me was that Dave saw the opportunity. In other words, okay, now your leader, whoever owned that station or somebody was up here at that point, and they said they gave you the shot and gave the opportunity because they saw the energy. They saw that you were positive. They saw that you were learning. They saw that you wanted to take on that job and that responsibility, but they also believed in you. And this has happened to me in my life, even from a young age. I think about when I graduated from University of Alabama in Birmingham, they hired me to teach. And I said, why are you hiring me to teach? And they said, well, you were top in your class, and we believe that you've got the ability to teach. And I'd been there. After about a year, the program director left, went and got another job, and they promoted me to the program director. And I can't think about this. I'm 23 years old. I get a job. I end up being the program director over the program at the University of Alabama, Birmingham in the Health Sciences Department. And I'm running a program. And I think I've got a daughter, 23 years old. I think about young 23-year-old people that I meet and can they do these kind of things? But for some reason, rather than promoting the people that had been there longer and were older than me, they put me in the job. And so same thing happened when I went to LifeMark Corporation. I got promoted up because I was taking on more, and I was working hard, and I was focused, and I was reporting everything that I was doing. And they felt confident in giving me that job. And I think, Dave, if you look back on your situation, whoever the person over you was, they looked at you and they said, hey, I think Dave can do this. Did that happen?
Yeah, and I stepped up.
Stepped up.
I did it, right? And that's what so many people, especially this sort of new generation coming into the workforce, you don't see as much of that, I think, as you used to. The Dave Greens and the Richard Scrushys, who will step up and just do it, just take charge rather than waiting. Because if you're someone who waits for others to tell you what to do, as you talked about earlier, I don't know that you have that entrepreneurial mindset, really.
So what you're saying is you can be working in a company and still be an entrepreneur. You can take on the vision of that entity, whether like I said, whether it was in your teaching in a university setting or you're working for a company. I started out running a division at LifeMark, and within a year they gave me another division. So I had two divisions. I said, why are you giving me this other division? What made you decide? And they said, well, the president of that division is gone. And that's another story, which I'd have to tell. We're going to talk about that one day, about corporate espionage, how another company stole this guy and then later fired him. Okay. Just because, anyways, I don't want to go there, but the bottom line is they gave it to me because they liked what I had done in that one division. Well, then I got another division 6 months later. I ended up running a huge organization and thousands of people and, $100 million operation. And they just kept promoting me up. And because they saw that I kept taking it on and I kept working really hard to make it successful. So, I had that entrepreneurial spirit, even though I was working in someone else's company. But my goal, once I realized that, I woke up one day and I said, well, wait a minute, I'm running all this myself and I'm making these decisions and they've given me this high level of authority. I could be doing all this for myself. I don't need to be doing this for them. I can build my own company. I can hire my own people. And so, and that opportunity came. And I think that that's kind of where you are, because look at you now. I mean, Dave, you're an entrepreneur. You're building your media business. You're building these podcasts. You're working with me on a podcast. You're doing a lot of different things. And I know you shared some of the things that you're doing, and you're making investments and you're growing your business. And you just keep taking on more and more and more. It's exciting.
It is. It's an exciting time, and I love to build things. And, again, we want to make sure that when people have ideas, and you said this earlier with the person who already communicated with you, the biggest thing is figuring out first, is there a need for what it is that you are wanting to do? So take us back. You said you saw the need with HealthSouth, and you saw with what you were doing that you were doing the work, and you knew how to take those next steps. What was the vision? What was the need specifically that you saw when you were starting HealthSouth?
You know what, Dave? I'm going to answer that question, but I want to plug next week's show just real quick. Please. We have a CEO of another company coming in next week. That guy's fascinating. He saw a need. He developed a product, and he's going to tell us all about the need he saw, about the product he made, and then he went to market with it. Okay, so he figured out the need. He figured out how to make the product to solve the need. He figured out, the cost of doing it, who's going to manufacture it. He had to get a warehouse. He had to hire people. He had to do the whole thing. He had to put in a sales program, and he went out and he did it. Now he's going to be on our show next week, and he is a very smart guy. He's very motivational. And so, our goal is to bring on people like that. And then in September, I got to say this too. We have the commitment of another major CEO out of Atlanta who's going to come and talk about his company and building it. And he spent the last 20 years building a very successful business. And when you hear what he's done, it's going to blow your mind, because he took on early on in his company, a multi-billion-dollar, one of the largest corporations in America became his client. And it's just like in the first year or so of him starting his business. But he was focused. He knew what to do. He made the relationships, and he's going to share that story. So you don't want to miss these podcasts coming up, because we're going to keep putting people on. So this show today really is going to tie with those two guys. And the guy that's coming on next week, seeing the need and then building the product. Now, that's a little bit different, because I saw the need and I built a service. So they're different kind of businesses. You got products, you got services, you got different things that you're going to be involved in, and different businesses of different types. But in my situation, what really motivated me, I was looking at the cost of healthcare, and I was studying it, and I began to look at what it costs to provide healthcare. And then all of a sudden in 1983, 1984, now I'm telling my age, the federal government came out and changed reimbursement for hospitals. They changed the reimbursement. And what they did was they eliminated profits in all the ancillary departments, like in the respiratory therapy or physical therapy or pharmacy or laboratories. They squeezed out the profit for all the Medicare side of things. And the way they did that was they came with what's called DRGs, diagnostic related groups. And somehow, in the genius of our federal government in the Medicare, in the Medicare department in Washington, they decided that there were about 365 or 375, I can't remember, disease states and situations that a human might experience. And they just put a limit on them and said, we're going to pay so many dollars, this amount per diagnostic related group. And so when they did that, the fact that if you did more physical therapy on a patient, you didn't get paid for it. It was an all inclusive bill. And so when they did that, they eliminated a lot of the profits in hospitals. And as a matter of fact, when I was originally working for LifeMark Corporation, hospitals were all cost-based reimbursed, meaning that Medicare paid the cost no matter what it was. And so what they did was when they went to this diagnostic related group, they reduced the Medicare payout tremendously to the hospitals across the nation. And when they did that, it was a major penalty. And a lot of hospitals went out of business. It closed hospitals, but the profitability went down. And so I'm watching that, and I'm working for a national hospital company that's, we're in 26 states. We got hospitals all across the country, and I'm an senior executive in that company running the division. And I saw what was going on, and I said, well, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so I began to think, again, there's that puzzle working, that entrepreneurial spirit beginning to say, hey, how do you make this better? So I came with the idea that we've got to continue to increase quality. And I'll tell you why, because we got to get these patients out of the hospital. We have to treat them. We have to provide good services. It's got to be high quality, but we got to figure out how to get the costs down. So I began to look at all the services we were doing in the hospital, and I began to realize that there were a lot of things that could be done on an outpatient basis and didn't need to be done in a hospital, and that patients could be discharged sooner. There was a day when, mom had a baby, she'd stay in the hospital a week. Well, then they cut it down to where it was like 3 or 4 days, and now they got it down to hardly even staying there overnight. I mean, it's just incredible how they have taken it down. If you remember, if you had your knee operated on, you had a big old scar on it. Now you have a little bitty cut because it's arthroscopic. So things have changed. And early on, we didn't even have MRIs, which was you put a patient in it and it'll find things wrong with you. So there was a lot of general surgery where it was to explore. So it was exploratory surgery. So they would open people up to see what was going on inside of you because they didn't have MRIs. So that was expensive. So now with the new technology of MRIs, it saves a lot of surgery. Arthroscopic surgery has brought the costs down. So what I saw was, how can we take these patients out of the hospital and take them into an outpatient setting, take them through the healthcare system, give them quality care, but yet get them off the healthcare dollar. So my goal was to produce a high quality program, but with high quality, good outcomes, and reduce healthcare. And our slogan was getting people back to work, back on the job, back to work, back to school, and back to living again. And by getting them well quicker in a less costly environment. So the network was to build these comprehensive outpatient rehabilitation facilities across the country in major markets, where we could then say, take these patients out of the expensive setting of a hospital, where the hospitals needed to move them out because they're only being paid X amount of dollars for treating them. So the hospitals were good. Hey, take them, get them out of here. We're going to be paid $5,000 for this procedure. If we keep them an extra 3 or 4 days, we're going to lose money. So you take them, Richard. They were all good with that. And of course, the doctors then are incentivized to work with the hospitals to move them through the healthcare system, get them off the healthcare dollar. I don't want to spend, the whole show today talking about all of that, but that was an idea that I saw working in the healthcare company, and I began to develop that idea into a business plan. I talked last week, I came up with a business plan. I put together the cost of doing it and the people and everything and the reimbursement and how it was going to work. And I was telling trying to recruit a guy, and I was at Stouffer's Hotel there in the Greenway Plaza in Houston, and in the restaurant for breakfast. I was recruiting a guy. And then the venture capitalist sitting 2 tables over heard me telling him about my business, and he came over and gave me his business card and said, I love what you're saying. I want to invest in your company. And as a matter of fact, he did end up putting money in the company. He put the first $1 million in, but that was after he made me put in my own money, and we put our own money in, and I had to, fund that. And he gave me milestones. So, going back to let's coming up with an idea. When somebody comes to me, and like this gentleman that came to me recently and wants to talk about this new business idea he's got, which I kind of like. One of my questions to him is, what are your milestones? What are you going to do first? What are you going to do second? What are you going to do third? What's the first milestone going to cost you? What's the second one? At the third one, where are we going to be when we hit the third one? Where's the return come in? So we start talking about details. Now, that's the building blocks Okay, that's what you got to do at the beginning. So you got the idea and you got the concept and you got the desire in your heart and you got the entrepreneur spirit, but does it make sense financially? And that's kind of where I want to get all of the young entrepreneurs and the people that are out there thinking about starting their business. I want them to start kind of getting in that place. And look, a glass is half full. If you've got a burning desire to do it and you believe that you've got a great concept, I'm all for you. I'd be the first person to say, hey, let's go down that road and see if we can't make some money and put it together. Here, and let me just say this, there are a lot of naysayers. And you can go all the way back to the scripture. If you may remember Joseph, and his brothers, in Genesis 30, I think it's 37:5. Joseph, told his brother about his dream. God gives us dreams. I believe that. And I mean, where does it come from? And our mind again puts things together. But his brothers hated him when he told him about his dream, what he wanted to do. You've got to stay away from people that are going to be naysayers. Okay. There are people out there that are jealous. And when you go to them and you say, I got this great idea, just like this guy came to me, I didn't say that's stupid. I didn't say that's crazy. I said, tell me more. I want to hear about it. It sounds like it might be an opportunity. And so, look, great people are encouragers. Okay. Naysayers are going to talk you down and they're going to try to create a situation where you don't go. My cousin was a great guy. And he said to me, you need to go do it. And if he had said to me, that's stupid and I don't think you ought to do it, I might not have done it. I mean, be honest with you, because I believed him. I mean, I trusted him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we might not be sitting here today if it wasn't.
That's right.
If it wasn't for that. I want to go back to the money part because
yeah.
I think it's key, right? So if you are even considering putting something out there for investment, but not planning to put anything in yourself, number one, it has to be probably a real special circumstance. But number two, if you're doing that, you have to expect you're going to be giving up most of your company, correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's called dilution. Okay. And what happens is you may come, you've got 100% of your idea when you start out, as long as it's your money. But when somebody else puts money in, how much do they get? Okay, they're buying 20%, they're buying 30%, they're buying 50%. Let me tell you something, and we're going to get into this. This podcast is going to be very valuable for a lot of people. Look, they're venture capitalists and they're angel investors, and they're people that are going to tell you, I want 51% of your company. I want half of it. I want 80%. I want 60%. And you're going to go down that road. So you the entrepreneur is going to have to, the guy starting the business has got to make some decisions. How much of it am I going to give up? And let me tell you there are formulas for that. And and it's called, we have to determine what the valuation is on the company. So, we determine a value, say we determine that the valuation is $1 million. And a guy says, I'm going to put in 100,000. Well, he only gets 10%. If the valuation is $1 million, he gets 10%. So part of what you have to do, Dave, is when you're putting your business model together and you're putting how this thing is going to work, you got to do the research to determine exactly the kind of financial performance this dream or this idea or this company of yours is going to have. Okay, because we know that if it produces, let's say it's going to make $100,000 a year, and I'm just throwing numbers out, and let's say that the markets right now in that idea that you're trading, a similar idea, is paying 10 times. In other words, a multiple on the profits of that company, Wall Street's paying 10 times. Well, then that makes it, if it's doing 100, that makes it $1 million. I mean, this is kind of rough, but I mean, this is close. I mean, these numbers work. So then you can come in. So when you say to an investor, Wall Street's paying 10 times, and he'll say, well, yeah, but you're not a Wall Street company. You're just a private company. So you're only going to get 5 times or 6 times. And they'll do this to you, or 3 times or 4 times. But you have to know how to negotiate that. And that's what we're going to talk about, those kind of things. And I've been there so many times, and I deal with it. And I deal with it today. Every week I talk to people about this kind of thing. And how do you price your company? And how do you raise the money? And how much dilution do you take? But you're exactly right. When you take somebody else's money in, you're giving up ownership of your own company. And you just have to really work through that. And a lot of people make mistakes. They give up too much, or they don't want to give up enough, and they can't raise the money. So, and let me tell you what else. Different investors different level. Public market's going to pay a higher. They're good with the less and paying a higher multiple. But when you get down into the individuals and the friends and the smart angel guys, they're going to take a bigger piece of you up front. And also it makes sense because you may not have your company profitable yet. You may not have hit milestone 2, milestone 3. Now keep in mind, the guy that put money in my first big company, he wouldn't even put the money in until I hit the 3rd milestone. So, and the first milestone was put your management team together. I want to meet them. I want to see them. And I have to tell you this too. This is crazy, but he was asking for like 6 references from each one of my people that I was bringing in on my management team. He asked me for 20 references. I had to give him 20 references. I mean, I had to give school teachers I had back when I was going to high school, and he wanted every preacher. He wanted my neighbors that I grew up with. So I had to give him 20 references. I mean, he put me through the test. And so you may have some of that, I don't think it's quite as rigorous today as it was back then, but there are milestones. So that was the first thing. Got to have the people. Number 2, I want you to rent an office and have a place for them to work. I want you to get and buy the computers and set up the accounting department and do this and do that. And then I want the first facility that you're going to build. I want it up and I want it running, and I want patients coming in, and I want you to show me that these doctors are going to send them there, that Medicare is going to pay for it, and that the insurance company is going to pay. And until that's happening, I'm not putting my money in. Now that's where I had to go. And so I had to earn the respect of that investor. Now, today, I mean, I've seen a lot of investors put money in concepts before they were ever, that far down the road. But still, you still got to deal with valuation, and you still have to come up with that, and you have to project out some returns. Now, there are companies today, especially in the biotech area, where value is created because you have a patent or because you have a product. Maybe it's a drug or something. And so these huge multiples are put on it because they know that down the road, that's going to make a lot of money, where early on it's probably losing money. But that's a different world. And if you're in the biotech world, hey, okay, it's going to be a different game plan. So and I've dealt with that. I've served on boards of pharmaceutical companies, and I understand that, and I know how that works. So it just depends on the industry you're in.
Yeah, it certainly does. And obviously there are things that you just have to know and you have to do. So I'm curious for you, because I remember what it was like for me the first time you're setting up a company. There are a lot of things you have to do. There are a lot of steps that you have to take in order to handle all of the things just to get to the part where business and run the business and do all of those things. We're talking about legal work. We're talking about accountant work. We're talking about all of those things that have to be set up. Did you have someone who helped you through that, or was it because you had learned most of it while you were working for LifeMark that you knew about that, or how did you go about really setting up that business?
That's a great point that you brought up. Yeah, I had learned that. As I just like you said, you kind of went to school on that job that you had, and you learned the business you're in. I had the same experience. I spent 5 years in a New York Stock Exchange company in my latter part of my 20s and early 30s, and I just went to school on them. I knew, I had to have a controller. I knew that I had to have, certain people in, human resource folks, and I had to have an attorney that had a SEC, SEC attorney, and we had to have tax accountants and auditors and all that, because I went through all of that. So I understood that. And so I was able to focus on making sure that we put together the right people. So when I went out to look for a lawyer, I knew what kind of lawyer I was looking for. When we went out to look for accountants, we hired one of the big 8, I think big 6 or 5 or 7, whatever it was back in those days, but one of the good firms. And we were very careful about all of that, and we had to negotiate that. And then, there time came where we had to pick our bank, and we had to go down and talk to our bankers and hope that we'd be able to put some kind of financing together with them at a certain point. So yeah, I'd gone down that road with another company. And again, having worked in a New York Stock Exchange company, I knew the ramifications of being a public company. So in my mind, as I was building this company and I looked at the growth trajectory, in the future, I had it that we would at some point, as we've got profitable, we would go to Wall Street, we would get investment bankers, we would bring them down, we'd let them look at the company, and at some point we'd take the company public, which is what we did. So that was all in the plan. We understood that our goal wasn't to sell the company ever. It was to grow it and build it. So that was our strategy, but you're exactly right. So there is a process you go through, and we can talk about selecting attorneys and accountants and different people at some point on the show. And I think we probably will as we bring on additional entrepreneurs that have built companies, and we'll ask them about it and let them tell their story.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have questions you'd like to ask Richard Scrushy, info@scrushionbusiness.com. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video if you're watching us on YouTube. And of course, we are available on all major podcast outlets as well, scrushionbusiness.com or @scrushionbusiness on social media. And Richard, as you look back on the history and doing that, I look back on mine. And I give people a little bit of a warning because I thought I had landed a really good situation right as I was starting my first company, where I met a financial planner who was part of a business group and said, "Hey, I've got an attorney, an accountant, I've got everybody that you need that could possibly help you." And we kind of worked together as a group, which I thought, oh, that's a terrific idea. What ended up happening was I ended up getting way oversold because I was a new business owner. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I don't necessarily think that they took advantage of me, but I didn't know the questions to ask. I didn't know what it was that I was looking for. I didn't think to myself, maybe there's things we can do now and some things that we can do later, because I was just taking their advice. And of course, any time in life, no matter who it is, if it's the first time doing something, boy, it sure helps to have somebody alongside who's been there and done it before.
Boy, you're so right. I do not believe at all, Dave, that I would have been able to do what I did had I not spent 5 years learning what I learned at LifeMark. And they taught me so much. And I had, like I said on the last show, the leadership there was superb. I had great bosses. The chairman of the board, Bill Mackey, he was a former professor at Rice University. Paul Farzan, who was the president of the company. These guys were great. Bill Longfield. I worked with a guy named Dennis Devane and some other guy. There's a gentleman that I worked with who, was just a real butt kicking guy that taught me how to do so many different things and really laid out some really good marketing strategies and helped me with it. So anyways, all of that, I absorbed all that because I was so hungry and I wanted it, and I just ate it up. And so I was able to use that. So yeah, I would have never done it. And what I learned, because my bosses there, they demanded that you work hard and they demanded success. And we had to do reports. We had to be there at meetings. I'm telling you, I remember one of my bosses, he had a meeting every morning at 8:00. Can you get that? Every morning he called it a huddle. And if you were out of town, it was okay. You didn't have to be there. But if you were in town, you had to be there at 8:00 and you had to be in his office. And I remember one morning I got there at 8:05 and he locked his door and he wouldn't let me in. I knocked on the door and he had a glass you could see in there. And he said, "Nope, you were late." And I tell you, I never was late again. And I learned that, but he taught us perseverance through things we had to work on. I mean, he would, like, if you're working on a contract, he'd say every week, "Okay, Scrushy, where is it? Have you got it done? Okay. Why haven't you closed it? What are you doing? Go make it happen. How long is it going to take you?" And so, I mean, he was that kind of a boss. And so he built that into me. And so, I got it. And so it didn't take long for me to understand that when I came in those meetings, he was going to ask me the tough questions and I better have the answers. So I did the same thing when I started HealthSouth. I set up a Monday morning meeting. I had a lot of my people, the naysayers, they criticize you. They called them, Monday morning meetings, not Monday morning meetings, but I didn't care. Look, the bottom line is it's all about communication and leadership. You need to know what your people are doing. They need to know what the plan is, and you got to communicate with them. And so it's something that you have to do. I mean, leaders have to show the way. I mean, I had the vision. God had given me the vision, and I was going down that road, and And I was, we were batting 1,000 on the things we were hitting. When we set up the outpatient program, it worked. When we set up the surgery center program, it worked. We set up the imaging company, it worked. Built the rehab hospitals, it worked. When all of the things that we were doing, we built the sports medicine programs. We became known for sports medicine throughout the whole world. We took a leadership role in sports medicine. We worked with over 100 Olympic and professional athletes. We were representing teams. We had contracts with all the major baseball teams, football teams, basketball teams. We were out there. We had the LPGA, the PGA. We were working nationwide and throughout the whole country, wherever major city. We built an incredible organization that was extremely successful. And we were seeing over 100,000 patients a day. Well, how do you do that? You do that by being focused. You do it through leadership. You do it through, understanding. You got to do. I was still having visions. I mean, it wasn't like I just had one vision and we just started this one thing. I mean, as long as I continued to work, these visions kept coming. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing that. So I kept adding and growing and building the platform even bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what happens when you're in a leadership role. And we see that in companies. Look at Elon Musk. What's he going to do next? The guy just keeps on and just keeps on and keeps on doing things. And we see that, I am so blown away with the whole Amazon product. It's crazy. I mean, it's at the point now. So I ordered something the other day and they said it'd be delivered between 12 midnight and 4 a.m. I got up that morning and there it was. And my wife shows me all the time, we'll forget I have 9 grandchildren, so we'll forget a grandchildren's birthday, right? She'll call me and say, it's so-and-so's birthday today. And I'm ordering something. And I said, well, will they get it? Yeah, they said they'd have it there by 2:00. I mean, come on. I mean, my goodness, we're seeing things today that we could not even dream about. And so, there are people out there right now that are watching this podcast or will watch it. And I'm telling you right now that they see opportunities. They see a niche. They see an opening. They see a need. Well, if it's a big enough need and you see it, you might be the only one to see it. You got to understand that, in the whole entrepreneurial characteristic, okay, a visionary will see the vision and other people don't see it. Okay, so when I went out and did what I did, I was the first doing that in the country. Nobody else saw that vision. And I built that nationwide international company because I saw that vision. And then later, other people started copying me. And they're called Me Too companies, all right? I was first out of the box. So when I went to Wall Street and I laid out my plan, they were saying he's building a whole new industry. And that's what we've seen with other great entrepreneurs building a whole new industry. Now, look, there's some great Me Too companies that come along and do some great work. And there's nothing wrong with being a Me Too CEO, because if it's a good concept and there's room in the space, then you will see that other companies will start. And let me tell you, Wall Street then starts looking for other companies, other CEOs, other entrepreneurs that can go into that same space, and they will fund it because they already know the space is proven, but they want to make sure there's room in the space. So, you may have the same idea and you may say, look, I can do that too. And you may have the vision to be able to go do it and build a company. And that's great too. So, I mean, we can talk about all of these different things, but leadership, okay. And you will then add leadership. You will develop leadership under you. If you're a real leader, you'll develop leaders, because you can't build a multi-billion-dollar company by yourself. You better add leadership to it. And so you got to bring people in. So when you're looking, I used to tell people, be careful. Don't hire all your relatives. Don't hire all your relatives just because they're relatives. And I've seen companies go down because they had all the relatives there. I'm not saying don't hire relatives, because some of your relatives are very talented. But you better hire enough people that know and can help and can, pull the wagon, or you're going to find yourself in the ditch.
I always tell everyone, Richard, if you're going to hire him, just think about what it's going to be like to fire him, because there's a pretty good chance that you're going to have to do that with just about every employee that you bring on. So if you're going to hire your brother, you better think about what it's going to be like to tell your brother that you're going to have to let him go before you make that hire. But yes, it is. There's a lot of people that suddenly become your really good friend when you have a new company and you have jobs.
I've got to tell you what you just said. It reminded me of one of the early on in management. I read one of Peter Drucker's books, and it was called Tough Minded Management. Okay. And Peter Drucker, in his book, he said that we need to manage like we're leather, because leather can bend and stretch, right? Not like steel, because steel is too harsh, like that. So there's situations where we can't be too harsh, because people don't like people that don't stretch and move a little bit, because everybody's situation is a little bit different. So you got to be able to move and stretch a little bit and have some flexibility. Another thing that Peter said, he said the best way to predict the future is to create it. So, and that's an entrepreneur. He sees the niche, he sees the opportunity, he sees the need. And so he creates that future in that space, in that situation. And that is a unique spirit, to be able to see those things. Now, again, I've had a lot of people tell me some things that were crazy and didn't work, and what weren't going to work. And I'll be totally honest with you. I probably put some money behind some people that I believed in, and their concepts failed. But that's just the way it is. But what you don't want, if you're truly an entrepreneur, is you don't want to 20 years from now look back and say, if I'd have built that company, I'd have been a billionaire. Yes. And so somebody else came up and did what you had the idea, and you didn't do it. So, let's hopefully we motivate some folks here on this show as we go forward that will say, hey, I'm going to step out. I'm going to figure out how to do this. I want to make this happen. And I'm listening to what these guys are saying. I'm going to put my milestones together. I'm going to figure out exactly what the returns are, what it's going to cost, and I'm going to build a model. And look, if you're doing that and you're watching this show and you send me an email at info@scrushyonbusiness.com. I'll be glad to respond. I have no problem telling you what I think about it. I believe I can get to all of them. I'll look forward to that. And if you have any questions, certainly, let us know.
Fantastic. It's great talking business with you, Richard. I'm going to enjoy this a lot, because I'm learning as you and I get an opportunity to talk. And as you said, we invite people to engage as well. You can reach the show by visiting scrushyonbusiness.com. You can follow us on social media at scrushyonbusiness. And as Richard said, you can also email the show, info@scrushyonbusiness.com. If you're watching us here on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button right there and like this video as well. And if you're listening to us, you can do that as well when you get home. But if you're watching, you can know that you can get us on Apple, Spotify, all the major podcast outlets. We've got a great show coming up next week. Our first guest CEO is going to be Bill Manovic, the CEO of Simple Scrub, and we look forward to sharing that story next week. Richard, any final words before we put a bow on our second episode?
Well, I just want to, many people know who Vince Lombardi is. Vince Lombardi said, winners never quit and quitters never win. So follow that dream if you've got one. Watch our shows next week. Bill Manovic will be on the show. He's a great guy. You want to hear his story. He started with that need. He's going to tell you what he saw, and he's going to tell you how he filled that gap, and you don't want to miss that. So I look forward to next week. And thank you, Dave. It's been a great show. I appreciate your time and your efforts and your support.
Thank you, and we will talk to everybody next week here on Scrushy on Business.